Welcome to this worship service of the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Shelter Rock in Manhasset, New York. I'm Carol McHugh, a member of the congregation and a worship associate. Ours is a congregation of people with different theological beliefs, but shared values. Foremost among them, respect for the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Within the framework of our shared values, we covenant to respect each other's beliefs and spiritual practices. Each Sunday, we take a little time to consider together a theme or topic that connects us to our values so that we can live into them more fully and with deeper spiritual insight. In today's service, we consider together the theology of Rational Mysticism. Our special guest is Reverend Tamara Lebak. Reverend Tamara is an ordained UU social justice / community minister, diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, coach, prison chaplain, and former associate minister of All Souls in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She is the founder of the Restorative Justice Institute of Oklahoma, where she strives to help people know that they are not the worst thing they have ever done, nor the worst thing that has ever happened to them. The Restorative Justice Institute seeks to transform the retributive culture of Oklahoma. Now, let us center ourselves as we enter into a time of worship, people with different beliefs who worship together as one faith.
Good morning. Before I read the opening words, I just want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I want to acknowledge the land that I gather on today is the home of the Cherokee, Muskogee, and Osage nations, as well as the Caddo, Wichita, Quapaw, Kiowa, Comanche, Plains Apache, and Pawnee, and other tribes who called this land their home before forced removal. I'm grateful to be stewarding this land right now. Our opening words come from number 419 in the hymnal. Look to this day, for it is the life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day.
Each Sunday, we light the chalice of our religious heritage. We do this for our ancestors who taught us through their various religious traditions and by their actions for justice and hope. We do this for our children who are learning the traditions we teach and who learn more from our actions than our words. We do this for ourselves to remind us of who we are and who we seek to become. This flame symbolizes the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need. This do we affirm and covenant with each other. As Unitarian Universalists, the second principle we covenant to affirm calls us to promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. One of the most direct ways we live into this value each week is by taking up a collection to support local organizations and serve communities in need. Today's offering goes to Adventures in Learning, a Manhasset program which provides an environment that nurtures the minds, bodies, and souls of children from the formative years of early childhood through the impressionable years of pre-adolescence. Their activities focus on values of caring, honesty, respect, and responsibility. Adventures in Learning serves the children of low-wealth families many of mixed or no immigration status who have not been helped by any of the government COVID relief packages. In response to the current crises amplified by the pandemic, the program uses donations like yours to help families with grocery store gifts, rent payments, and cards for transportation. Between 70 and 100 families are served through this fund. Thank you for your generosity, your compassion, your dedication to building a more just and joyful world for everyone. There are 3 ways to contribute: by using the donate link in our website. Do be sure to choose special collection, by sending a text, or by using PayPal.
Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight, when true simplicity is gained. To bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right. 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight, when true simplicity is gained. To bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right.
Meditation, in the sense that I use the term, is nothing more than a method of paying extraordinarily close attention to one's moment-to-moment experience of the world. There is nothing irrational about doing this. In fact, such a practice constitutes the only rational basis for making detailed first-person claims about the nature of human subjectivity. Difficulties arise for secularists once we begin speaking about the kinds of experiences that diligent practitioners of meditation are apt to have. It is an empirical fact, he writes, that sustained meditation can result in a variety of insights that intelligent people regularly find intellectually credible and personally transformative. The problem, however, is that these insights are almost always sought and expressed only in a religious context. One such insight is the feeling we call I, the sense that there is a thinker giving rise to our thoughts, an experiencer distinct from the mere flow of experience, can disappear when looked for in a rigorous way. Our conventional sense of self is, in fact, nothing more than a cognitive illusion. And dispelling this illusion opens the mind up to extraordinary experiences of happiness. This is not a proposition to be accepted on faith. It is an empirical observation, analogous to the discovery of one's optic blind spots. Most people never notice their blind spots, he writes, caused by the transit of the optic nerve through the retina of each eye, but they can be pointed out with a little effort. The absence of a refined self can also be pointed out, though this tends to require considerably more training on the part of both teacher and student. The only faith required to get such a project off the ground is the faith of scientific hypothesis. The hypothesis is this: if I use my attention in the prescribed way, it may have a specific, reproducible effect. Needless to say, what happens or fails to happen along any path of spiritual practice has to be interpreted in light of some conceptual scheme, and everything must remain open to rational discussion.
To see our world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wildflower, holding infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour.
To see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wildflower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour.
To see our world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour.
At a conference at the Union Theological Seminary in New York in 1940, Albert Einstein said, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." We are confronted daily by pop psychology and pseudoscience on TV and in bookstores. And it's in those bookstores where you'll find that the philosophy section is often surrounded by twice as many self-help books. And the religion section carries the world's sacred scriptures, volumes of comparative religious works, and barely a mention of Unitarian Universalism. We are confronted by a world of opportunity where our interests need only be curiously typed into a search engine on the internet, and we are instantly flooded with pages and pages of this free trade information market, where the user is left to determine what is accurate, what is valuable, and what is not. So as we sift through this wealth of information, often pre-categorized by our culture or by Google ad algorithms, I wonder, where are our blind spots? When we look only through a single lens at the world, then we too have blind spots, filled in by our expectations or the surrounding area. I believe that we could do some stretching of both our rational and our mystical muscles, for when we use them both, we develop this tension, a set of checks and balances that encourages creativity and makes space for the depth and breadth of the human experience. What makes us unique as Unitarian Universalists is that there is room in our tradition to work on your rational and intellectual sensibilities, as well as owning and examining your mystical experiences of the world. You see, theology, as I practice it in my UU context, is not simply the study of a Christian Godhead, as some would argue dismissively. Theology breaks down to the study of theos. And theos has several meanings in Greek. Theos can mean God, the ultimate, or whatever can in any respect be likened to God or resembles God in any way. So it's about the relationship of humanity to the ultimate. Theology, in its broadest sense, is a study of meaning making, of how we as human beings make sense of the implications of the human experience. Theology can also be traced to theologia, which by definition is a discourse on cosmology. Now, George F.R. Ellis is a Templeton Prize-winning author, a scientist, and a Quaker. And he's written some books exploring the science of space and time and the relationship of humanity to the universe. Ellis claims that there are two types of cosmology, one with a small c and another with a capital C. Small c cosmology, he writes, is the branch of science that deals with the physical universe, involving the structure and origins and development of the universe, and can be identified with the formation of galaxies and the gravitational forces acting upon them to shape the universe, of which Einstein's general theory of relativity pertains. The latter cosmology, one with a capital C, Ellis claims includes the involvement of human interests and the implications of that cosmos, capital C, that it has on humanity. Now, many cosmological theories are an attempt to arrive at both uses of the word, capital and lowercase, as we attempt to name our own theology in the work of people of faith, to understand our world. We also attempt to understand our place in it. The global story is to some extent our own story to claim. Now, what better place is there to have room to explore human meaning making and transformation than in a UU context where many theologies and science are both embraced? What better context than a theological one to grapple with our individual and our common big C cosmology? What better place to examine our blind spots than in the context of this religious community? So, what is your role in the universe? What is our role in the universe? And what is consciousness? And what does it mean for people to experience some kind of non-ordinary conscious state? Now, my own journey began with the influences of my Buddhist Christian father, and meditation was a normal part of my early childhood memories. And as well-known atheist Sam Harris spoke about in our reading, meditation, despite any religious context, is a method of paying extraordinarily close attention to one's moment-to-moment experience of the world. So I have been encouraged to pay very close attention to my world from a very young age. I paid exceptional attention to my mother's gardening. I have memories of awe-filled mystical moments of her tending to the marigolds in our front yard every summer, attracting butterflies that would land on her fingers for moments at a time. She was like my own personal Snow White. I expected church to be the place where feelings of connection to people and nature would be anchored and replicated, nurtured, fostered, and explained. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, this was not the case. It was not my experience of church early on. The blind spots of the churches that I attended actually kept them from seeing me or my experience at all. When given the choice as a young adult, I mainly attended African American Baptist churches in the fifth grade, even younger than young adult, in the fifth grade, with my choir friends from school. And it was the music that moved me to this elevated height and fostered my feelings of connection with the people around me and with God. Until I was told by the elders, some of the elders at the church, that I was not able to join. They told me that there were plenty of white churches for me to join. I then went with my white friends to church in the sixth grade and went through the joining process there until the day that I was actually baptized, fully immersed in front of the entire congregation. It was an incredible experience. It moved me to tears with joy and pride and connection, so much so that I danced my way down the hallway following the event of that Southern Baptist congregation until I was met by my youth pastor's admonishment. "How dare you dance in the house of God?" he asked me. I left confused and disappointed and never returned. Still seeking a place for myself and my understanding of God, from 7th to 9th grade, I attended a Methodist church with my cousin. The youth group was fun with lots of activities like camping and sports, and I did feel connected to the other people there until a sermon on evil convinced me that I was being lied to. And I realized reciting the Apostles' Creed made me feel like I was lying. My understanding of the world and my place in it, I was beginning to realize couldn't fit into any church building. And so quite reasonably, I chose to not attend. Disillusioned by the dogma and the exclusiveness of the churches that I encountered, I began to see organized religion as just a tool of the status quo. It was becoming more obvious to me that images of God dictate who will feel worthy in a society and who will feel inferior, who will be respected and who will be despised, who will get easy access to the literal material goods of culture and who will have to fight for those very same goods. My cosmology, capital C, of that 16-year-old self shifted to focus primarily on reason and edged out pretty much any space for God. I was infuriated by the exclusiveness of the church. I turned away from organized religion and toward service as a focus for my value in the world. My temple became academia. I read Camus and Sartre and found existentialism in education to be consistent and salvific, creating space for me to be included and rewarded. During this time, I mostly described myself as atheist or agnostic, yet I still could not fit all of my experience into this cosmological frame. There was no room in my predominantly logical understanding to explain beauty or creativity or synchronicity or transcendence or evil or consciousness or self-sacrifice. No input on how I should love or strive or hope, on how to connect with others or combat loneliness. Like the churches that had failed me before, logic, reason, science, and even philosophy too had blind spots, unable to hold my experience. And yet it was reason itself that insisted time and time again that buying into the extremes of any perceived polarity leaves out the depth and the breadth of the human experience. It was reason that verified for me that my integrity was at stake. I began to see that an idolatry of reason is equally as dismissive to the complexity of our existence as religious idolatry. And so I came to believe that I could not worship reason any more than I could believe a dogmatic and fundamentalist religious creed. Somehow I knew that both the core of my mother's Christianity and my father's Buddhist Christian practices, they were not contradictory. I understood that we were all part of a sacred universe that could embrace the entirety of the human experience, including my own. All of me, all of my identities, all of my mystical experiences, and even my sexual orientation. Einstein writes, "What separates me from most atheists is a feeling of utter humility toward the unattainable secrets of the harmony of the cosmos." It is my experience of this harmony that I would call mystical. It is an awareness of synchronicity, feelings along a continuum of awe, A-W-E, and aha, A-H-A, of metaphor that transcends the context of the moment, of content that extends well beyond its present, of this moment of experiencing our insignificance at the very same time that we're experiencing the world being meticulously designed and crafted specifically for us. Those are mystical experiences. It's when I'm presented with circumstances or coincidence that feels like an inside joke that only God and I would really get, and I laugh aloud. It's when I can feel that I was perfectly created, my brokenness and my gifts, to offer support to someone in a given moment at a particular time. It's when I surrender to the moment and stop pushing so incredibly hard and still seem to meet my intended goal miraculously. Mysticism, as Jean Houston so beautifully warns, begins with mist, has an eye in the middle, and ends in a schism. And so mysticism must be tempered with clarity, humility, and reason, and integrated into the fullness of our life. What mystical experiences have you had in your life that sit below the surface, maybe fueling your passion or your connection or your forgiveness? Do you foster those subtle moments of connection that appear out of the ordinary? Do you have someone with whom you can honestly discuss these occurrences, who can hold these experiences? I hope so. The word mysticism derives from the Greek root mu, which means silent or mute. In ancient Greece, the adjective mystikos referred to mystical knowledge that was revealed only to those initiated into esoteric sects. Over time, mystical knowledge came to be defined as that which transcends language itself and so cannot be revealed. But we try to put them into words. One thing I know is that it cannot emphasize the ego. It's not about believing that we are the only people who have access to these kinds of experiences. Everyone does. We just have to pay particular attention. Now, I've always been fascinated by people's mystical stories, but I'm even more interested in how that person integrates that mystical experience into their own lives, into their daily life. How the experience transforms their behavior or shifts their understanding. Part of my work in spiritual direction is helping people to anchor their spiritual experiences with something tangible so that they can re-enter those states more easily. Mystical experiences must be woven into the fabric of our daily existence to be transformative and meaningful. Now, mystical experiences can occur unbidden and without preparation. They can happen at any time, whether you're paying attention or not, sometimes. But if we look deeply, they can be understood as moments of connection between us and nature, between us and some larger meaning, between us and the ultimate. But since the mystical cannot be directly explained, we use metaphor, story, parable, paradox to express what we've experienced. I am most interested in how we can cultivate our mystical muscle, in addition to our rational leanings, so that we're not looking at the world from just a single perspective. We can actually see with both eyes open and create opportunities for those variety of insights that intelligent people regularly find and intellectually credible and personally transformative. Now, I engage in a daily practice that helps me remember my connection to the world and everything in it, that encourages me to pay attention at multiple levels of system, so that I'm not trapped in any particular time by content or content, text, or process, and elicit a sense of empowerment and humility. Renowned scholar Houston Smith argues that a mystical experience is not a feeling, it's a seeing, a knowing, a clear or new perspective, and we are gripped with certainty. Just like we need both eyes to help us see the world so that we are not filling in the gaps, so we also need both reason and mysticism to hold our experience in tension. I want to tell you a story about a trip that I took. I went to Canada for a portion of some Gestalt training that I was doing while I was in seminary. And one of my mentors in that program was from the Lakota tribe. And on my way home, I had to make the long journey from Chicago to Dallas by car. While I was in Canada, my teacher and I spoke of my totem. He wanted me to know what animals I associated with, or that I thought I associated with, so that the way that they made their way through the world might help to enhance how I saw the world. Animals that I saw often, or whose presence or way of being might help me understand my own journey. Now, in that conversation, I mentioned my affinity for red-tailed hawks and their persistent presence in my life. He nodded very kindly and asked when and whether owls too had been present in my life. My first inclination was no. And so I immediately said no. And he laughed. And in what could have been a very scripted moment, he pointed to my sweatshirt that I was wearing at the time that read Mighty Owl Swim Team, the mascot of this high school where I taught and coached swimming for 7 years before I went to seminary. That spawned a larger conversation about paying attention and my recounting several owl sightings that were actually quite impactful to me at significant moments in my life that I had just dismissed. Before I left Canada, he told me to keep my eye out for owl feathers, especially on the drive home from Chicago to Dallas. So there I was, along I-44, on the long drive home, alone, about 3 hours outside of Tulsa, when I saw this gigantic wing on the side of the road, flapping up and down, waving in the breeze of the cars passing by. I took the next exit and turned around, feeling both confident and ridiculous, to seek a prized red-tailed hawk feather, which for some reason I knew immediately it must have been. When I saw the wing blowing in the wind in the second pass, I hit the brakes, and by the time the car stopped, I was about 50 feet ahead. I got out of the car, and right outside my door was another smaller bird wing. I went directly to the 50 feet back to the hawk wing, placed an offering of some of my trail mix near the bird to pay my respects in the Lakota tradition that I was taught, and prayed, asking for a feather from the large bird's wing. I pulled, and not a single feather would come loose. I went back to my car, passed again the wing that lay right outside my car door, to look for any kind of tool to assist me in pulling a feather loose. There was nothing. I had my luggage from Canada, a Ziploc bag, and the last handful of trail mix. I called my teacher to ask him what he thought I should do. He said, "Well, you were compelled enough to stop. Is there anything else around?" I was just about to shut my door and give up when I looked down and said, "Well, nothing but this owl wing." The words actually fell out of my mouth before I even knew what I'd said. My teacher said, "Well, do you have anything to offer?" I looked at the rest of the trail mix in my left hand. Yeah, I do, I said. Do you have anything to put the wing in? He asked. In my right hand, I was holding a Ziploc bag, exactly the right size. Yes, I said. I put the offering on the ground and said a prayer and picked up the entire wing with the bag turned inside out and then maneuvered it into the bag. Simple, obvious, and a lesson I carry with me to this day. I have since cleaned that wing and looked it up. It was, in fact, the wing of an owl. Now, I don't believe that the world was created in order to give me owl wings, but that doesn't make this story less sacred to me. And it does feel like more than a coincidence. And I do know that my attention was guiding me in a particular direction, even though the outcome wasn't what I exactly was anticipating. But the point is not whether or not owls or red-tailed hawks are making themselves known in my life. It's that I regularly perceive them. It's where I turn my attention. And the point of that particular experience was beyond the content of owls and feathers. The content, to some extent, was irrelevant because the Gestalt was embedded in my meaning making and extended to this larger metaphor. You see, that event offered something very specific to me, larger than the literal context, the meaning that rang true at the depth of my being. It was that I do often overlook the obvious, easy task. I can pass by the gift that is right in front of me to head for the more difficult one. It was like a download in the Matrix. Aha, I thought, and awe I felt. It was not a directive from the universe, but a new awareness of what is, a pattern revealed, so that now I can make a choice about whether I want to continue to do the same thing or do something different. So embedded in our own understanding is the depth of mystical metaphor, and yet without the grammar of reason, we cannot make use of this mystical content to assist us in making meaning or transformation. Reason balances out my seeker heart and my poetic mind in order to help me integrate my experiences into who I am. And my mystical experiences of connection and transcendence help temper my reason with confidence and love, with tenderness and humility. Regardless of whether we're trying to improve on our rational side or our mystical side, we are ultimately trying to increase our ability to see, to pay attention, to see beyond the content of a conversation to the context and the process, to integrate our knowledge and our experience with our passion, our interest, and our identity. And when we're fully present, there are some common motifs behind human interaction that beg for our attention. There is a common desire for connection, to be seen, heard, understood, and known, to step out and into the awareness of those around us, so that we may be both rational and a mystic. So let us learn from Owl, with the most forward-facing eyes and the best stereoscopic vision of all birds, and therefore the fewest blind spots. May we look in all directions for how we might get in our own way. And let us also learn from Hawk, with the greatest density of nerve receptors seen in any eye, so that keen clarity of what it is that they are seeing occurs. May we be open to receive the varieties of the human experience, clearly, exercising our reason, awakening all of our senses to invite our mystical connections, and cultivating our awe to connect with the holy and our world. Amen. It's been a pleasure being with you today. Go in peace. May you not forget the infinite possibilities that are born to you of gratitude and of hope. May you use those gifts that you've received and pass on the love that's been given to you. May you be contented knowing that you indeed are a child of God. Let this presence settle into your bones and allow your soul the freedom to sing and dance and praise and love. Go and be blessed and be a blessing. Amen.
Now we extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and out into all the world.